In this video, we will show you how to replace your radiator on this Dodge Ram. This will be mounted in the front of your engine compartment. Let's get into it. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. Make your way over to the radiator cap, located on the passenger side of the radiator. We'll be pressing this down, turning it counterclockwise, and lifting it up and away from our face. Give the cap a quick inspection, replace it as necessary. We'll set that aside. Once you've opened up the radiator cap, make your way over towards the driver's side bottom corner of the radiator. We're feeling for the drain plug. You want to make sure you have a gloved hand, and of course have a collection bucket under this area. We'll turn this counterclockwise. As we're turning it counterclockwise, you're going to want to pull it rearward. You might have to use some pliers. There we go. Got a little bit of coolant coming out of this now. Now we can let the coolant drain. Now while that coolant's draining, let's continue on along the outside area here. You'll find that you have an air deflector on each side of the radiator, and that air deflector is held in place with two push clips. On the passenger side, we have one down here behind these lines, and then one just above it. Remove each of those two push clips and then do the exact same thing on the other side of the vehicle. Grab some pliers here. Here's one. Now that we have both of them out on this side, we'll do the exact same thing on the other side of the radiator. Now over on this side, these are a lot easier to get to. We'll just use our trim tool to break them free from the radiator. There's one. Make my way behind here. Perfect. Now that we've drained the cooling system, let's close our drain. There we go. Make sure that's nice and tight. Now let's make our way up to the upper radiator hose. On this, you'll find a clamp. You can give it a little squeeze. We'll pull the hose off of there, give the hose a quick inspection, make sure it's still soft and pliable. You can use regular pliers or some hose clamp pliers, whatever works for you. We'll just slide that right down the hose. After you've done that, we'll continue with a hose pick. We're going to break the hose free from the radiator, being extremely careful not to damage that hose. That looks good. We can set this aside. The next thing we'll do is use a 10mm to remove the 4 mounting bolts that hold the fan shroud to the radiator. The hardest one to get to is right up here, behind the washer fluid tank. You can easily gain access to this with a 10mm that can pivot. I'll be using a ratcheting wrench on this. Come right in there. Inspect the mounting hardware as you remove it, replace it as necessary. Now I'll switch to a 10mm on a ratchet here. This one up here. There we are. Now we can remove the overflow hose from the top of the radiator. Just take hold of that, we'll give it a wiggle. Quick check. At this point, you can pull the shroud away from the radiator. Now we can remove the lower radiator hose. For this, we have an 8mm head clamp holding this in place. We'll loosen the clamp and slide the hose off of the radiator. Now that we have the clamp out of the way, let's continue on with our hose pick. We want to break the hose free from the radiator without damaging the hose. Let's put our coolant collection bucket under here. A little bit more coolant out of there. Once you have the lower hose out of place, we'll be continuing on to our 2 transmission cooler lines. Let's remove this upper transmission cooler line using an 18mm wrench. We'll set that line aside. Now we can move along to the lower transmission cooler line. For this one, we want to dislodge the lock, which is this metal clip right here. I'll be using a screwdriver and I'll gently pry this out of place. Reach down in here, we can pull this out of here. Let's give that a quick inspection, make sure it is still reusable, and set it aside. The next thing we'll do is use a 3/8 transmission line removal tool. Now for this, you would want to open it up, slide it over the line, and then slide this area into the line right along here. Slides right over. Now I'm going to press it towards the line. While I'm pressing it that way, I'll also take the line and force it towards the tool. After you feel as though you have it in there as far as it can go, you can remove the line from the radiator. Slide that off of there. We'll give the line a quick inspection. We can set that aside as well. Remove your tool. At this point, we have everything removed from the radiator, in exception of our 2 10mm headed mounting bolts that hold the radiator to the body of the vehicle. We'll remove those. Just give that a quick inspection. Do the same on the other side of the radiator. Take hold of your radiator and remove it from the vehicle. There it is, friends. Along the bottom of each side of the radiator, you should have a rubber mount. You can use a screwdriver or a trim tool, and we'll just pry this right off the bottom of the original radiator. Give it a quick inspection. We'll do the same to the other side, and then we'll install these on the brand new radiator. Let's prepare our brand new radiator for installation. Along the bottom, you remember that we had those 2 rubber mounts. It's a good idea to apply a little bit of lubricant along the tab, and you should be able to slide this right into place. We'll do the same on the other side of the radiator. Now we can move along to the drain. We just want to ensure that this is nice and tight. Now we can get this in the vehicle. Now we can get ready to install that brand new radiator. As we're bringing this down into the proper position, we want to make sure we have those rubber mounts fall into the proper spot on the body of the vehicle. Just move it around until it falls in. There it is. With that slid into the proper place, we'll take our rubber mount, slide that into the radiator. Put the mounting bolt through here. We'll start that in by hand. Before we tighten this side, we'll make sure we do the exact same thing on the other side of the radiator, and then we can tighten the pair. Now we can move along to our 4 new clips that we got with our radiator. When looking at these clips, you'll find that they have a raised center. That's where the threaded area is. We want to have that raised area facing towards the inboard part of this radiator mounting point. We'll do the same to all. Now we can connect our lower radiator hose to the radiator. We'll slide this all the way in place and then tighten that clamp. Double check to make sure it's bottomed out completely against the radiator. Let's move a little further up here. We'll move along to that transmission cooler line. Take that, slide it in place. We're listening for a click, and then we'll lock it in. There's a nice click. Give it a strong tug to make sure it is properly secured. Now we can put on the clip. As for this, you'll find that you have this area that has two tabs that protrude towards the center, one on either side. Those tabs will slide into the transmission line, and this longer area will slide over the line to hold it in place. Let's pause on the transmission cooler lines and make our way to reconnecting the fan shroud to the radiator. We'll take the fan shroud and we'll align it properly, start in all 4 of our 10mm headed mounting bolts, and we can snug them up. Do the same to the other 2. That one's nice and tight. We'll do the same to them all. Now we can reattach our transmission cooler line. Use our 18 to snug it up. Secure your overflow hose to the radiator. Give it a wiggle to make sure it is secured properly. Along the driver's side top of the radiator, we'll resecure our upper radiator hose. Now we'll try to get the clamp back in its original position. Double check to make sure that's secured properly to the radiator. Now we can reattach our air deflectors. You'll notice along each side of the radiator you have 2 tabs. That's where your little clips will hold these in place. We'll just get it aligned and press it into the proper position. There's one. Double check to make sure they're secure. Do the same on the other side of the vehicle. Now the next thing we're going to do is fill the cooling system. There's a couple different ways that you'd want to do this. One would be with a funnel. You can go ahead and put the adapter right along the top here. Install the funnel on there, and then continue adding coolant. Once it starts burping, what you would want to do is start up the vehicle and continue watching the fluid level. We want to try to burp out all the air bubbles that are in the system. Once all the air stopped coming out, you can use your little plunger here. We'll plunge that off, and then remove this and install the cap. For me personally, I'm going to be using a vacuum system. I'll hook it up on here. It's going to draw a vacuum in the cooling system, and then I'll draw the coolant directly in and avoid any air bubbles. Now for this tool in particular, it's great because as I'm creating suction, this needle will make its way all the way up into the green. And what we want to do is watch and make sure that it does not drop into the yellow or worse, into the red. If it does, that means that there's a leak and you need to tighten one of your hoses. On here. When you're using a tool like this, it's a good idea just to give it a second and watch that needle. Make sure you don't get needle drop. And now we can start filling the cooling system. This is drawing the coolant directly through the hoses into the radiator and the rest of the cooling system. Now, if you're using a tool like I just used, it's still a good idea to use a funnel. The reason why is because we're going to be running the vehicle and we want to allow any air bubbles to make their way up and into the funnel, and then the fluid that's in the funnel down into the cooling system. Now, once you're sure that it's nice and full, we'll continue on with that radiator cap. Put it on there, turn it all the way to the right until it's nice and tight. Double check it. Once you've done that, continue on to checking your coolant reservoir. That's just along the passenger side of the coolant fan shroud. Make sure it's up to par. If it needs to be added to, just go ahead and lift up on this yellow cap, add as much as needed, and then close it up good and tight. Okay friends, we showed you how to install the radiator on your vehicle. At this point, you want to double check for leaks. Hop in the passenger compartment and allow the vehicle to run until you feel constant heat coming out of those vents. After that, go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.